and approve. Maybe they're done now. I don't know. I haven't looked. Okay, yes. The sheets keep going around. Public comment just came in related to the calendar. So if you have your email, you can check it.
I also have a
Okay, yeah, go for it.
Okay. My name is Laura Muller, and I'm a Bar Harbor resident and parent of a Thomas Emerson student. I want to thank the AOS administration for the responses to the calendar discussion at last month's school committee meeting, in particular, the concerns raised about the January dates disrupting 2 weeks. Now it looks like they're only disrupting 1 week. I would like to add my voice to those of the school committee members who raised concerns about the ping pong nature of having multiple weeks with half days that seem kind of all over the place from the perspective of a parent who's trying to establish routine for their child and for their family. I am here to advocate for weekly half days at the elementary school and middle school level, because although it looks like less school or in time in school, it actually allows for a broader educational mission and for more regular and more productive school time for the children who are involved. The conversation last month focused on the fact that we have community partners who may be interested in providing childcare for students on half days. However, in the current structure where we have half days, sort of in an irregular schedule, we do not give those community partners a chance to establish either their own curriculum or their regular employees that they might need in order to be able to staff such a program. So I urge the school committee, as was discussed at the last school committee meeting, to have a subcommittee looking at community partners. In my last community, the half-day structure was one that actually people came out of the woodwork to offer half-day programs for students who were on the half-day every week schedule. Finally, I would like to speak to middle school sports. The middle school children who are involved in sports often leave school early in order to make it to, say, Sumner or somewhere else. And that also disrupts the days on weeks when there's not half days. If we had a regular half day in the schedule, the middle school students would not be getting out early. They'd be able to travel to those schools and make it there on time. I do understand that you guys have done a lot of work, and I'm grateful for the work that you have done to come up with the calendar thus far. I hope we can work together and think about the ecosystem of the learning communities that we have in this town. We have a lot of educators and a lot of civic organizations that are willing to offer education, and I hope we can think of that. I appreciate the many competing interests that have a stake in the creation of the calendar. Please, as you consider the calendar tonight, consider the needs of the children and families who need routine as important stakeholders in this process. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Okay. Is there a motion for approval of the minutes from January and 24 January, and they can be a slate?
So moved.
Second. Any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Okay. Reports and updates. We have the superintendent's report.
Welcome to February, everybody. Though I'm sure the last weekend over the weekend it didn't feel like February outside. I was on the island on Sunday, and there were people in shorts and people biking and walking around. It's like, February, really? But so welcome to February, the new normal. In terms of our enrollments, from the last time we looked at it in January, we had 1,410 students, and this month we have 1,411. And that constant sort of up and down of our enrollment sort of continues as it moves. I wanted to talk a little bit about in terms of district staffing and what that looks like. And we are filling some of our positions, and others are opening up. And you saw that Matt at the high school, is doing interviews for that position there. We still are looking for special ed and speech and language are, some of the biggest concerns. And, as we go into that hiring season, that'll be a big push on our end. And just a reminder that actually Julie and Rhonda will be heading up to Farmington for the job fair that they do up there, and we're trying to make more connections with other area universities to try to build those connections with universities, and particularly knock on the door of the special ed folks. As you remember, in my earlier budgets, we had sort of built in an HR position, and then I sort of pulled that position out and said that I was going to be working with the staff in the superintendent's office to sort of be able to maybe think differently about how we do some of that work. And one of the things, and we've begun doing some of that work, and there are sort of 5 areas that I'm focusing on in HR, and one of those is hiring and training, performance management, professional development, compensation and benefits, and compliance. It's like our CBAs, labor laws, DOE certification, and NEO. The first things that we are looking at is sort of the hiring and training. And so far in the work with that team, we are working on streamlining the hiring process to probably take a little bit of load off the principals and sort of have a one-stop shopping in terms of where they go for the information that they need for hiring. Looking at better onboarding for our new staff, and that includes an idea of a type of employee launch page where they would have information that is most important for them to be able to take a look at, and that might have staff training information and other places where it's easier to get information where they can find things themselves. So we're really working hard on that because we're going to be onboarding and hiring people really soon. So we want to do our best to try to streamline that process. And in the office, our next round is sort of taking a look at what I'm calling buckets 4 and 5, compensation and benefits and compliance, and how within the people that we utilize in our office, are we utilizing their strengths to be able to support all those 2 aspects of HR. And then I'll share information as I come back, but that's sort of where we're looking at next, and to see if we make a difference for our principals and for our employees when they're coming to be hired. I wanted to talk a little bit about school highlights. I'll start with the high school. And we sort of already talked about that. I'll be playing on the unified game, so that'll be fun on Friday. So I'm not much of a great basketball shooter, but I can run, I can tell you that. So watch out. They'll pass me the ball and I'll pass it to somebody else. And then again, just sort of highlighting, it's really fun in my role to come and be able to watch some of the sporting events in the evening. So I was here for that rivalry, both the boys and the girls game with Ellsworth. And like I said, at the high school game, I went over to the superintendent of Ellsworth because she's still kind of coaching and said, Amy, let's show them, what it looks like we can get along. And so we had a hug there. And then I went to the boys swimming PBCs. And just watching, and I shared this at the high school meeting, and just sort of watching the camaraderie between teammates, and whether it was Ellsworth or competitors between Ellsworth and NDI, or NDI and the Bangor teams, and just watching them speak with each other and encourage each other. I mean, the greatest thing to watch in a sporting event is when they finish, whether it's running or whatever, and swimming, there's this sort of built-in thing that they do where they give each other, they go over to the lane next to them and sort of congratulate the person next to them, and sort of, what a thing to build in our young people, and to sort of honor that and to highlight that. At Connors Emerson, some of the things going on is the civil rights team there is working on their canvas mural that is sort of trying to make the school a little bit more welcoming to students and families as they come in. As in some of our other schools, the 8th grade will be doing the National Assessment of Educational Project. They were picked for science this year. 5th graders did their first edition of a newspaper. And in some of the art projects that they're doing there, they're studying in Egypt. I think this was in 4th grade, and doing hieroglyphics and portraits of a profile. I guess that's a thing in Egypt, the profiles. On Cranberry Island, I was out there for a couple of meetings on for for their budgets and seeing what the kids are doing. And one thing they added is a bird feeder cam. And if you were to go to the Cranberry Island school website and take a look at the newsletter and see their bird feeder cam, and what the kids are doing are researching the birds that come into that community. And as part of the newsletter, there's a little bit about the birds that they see there, the bird of the month. I think it's this month there's a cardinal that comes back and forth, and their name is Franklin. And then the write-up this week is about a black cap chickadee, though they didn't put the name for it.
Franklin's the black cap chickadee.
Franklin's
Donald is the cardinal.
Donald is the cardinal, Franklin is the black cap chickadee that comes. It's just sort of really cool to read the little pieces, and I got a chance to talk to one of the students who sort of puts that information online, and it's really engaging work that they're doing. And they had their 100th day, as many of our schools did last week. And some of the things that they collected were quarters, Legos, and rocks to sort of bring in and work on their cardinal counting. In Frenchboro, those kids are coming off every Wednesday. I sort of talked about that and spending time at Pematic. And they also were part of the TLC, which is sort of an island learning community. And they do a weekly gathering. They did a Valentine's gathering where all the schools that are part of the TLC got a chance to see each other, over the computer and talk about their experiences. So that was neat. At Mount Desert, I was at the boys' game. Actually, I came off of Cranberry and then came here to the high school to watch the middle school boys. And if you saw the score at halftime, you wouldn't expect it that the Mount Desert boys would be able to come off and become the Coastal League champs. But what a wonderful game to watch. Of course, it was sad that Pematic didn't win that, but however, the Pematic girls did win. So, it kind of balances
Tremont
out.
and Pematic.
Pematic and Tremont. I was getting to that.
Thank you.
Right. Tremont, the Trematic team.
Embrace the name.
So that was sort of really neat to sort of, to watch them play. And the gym was packed. It was, pretty cool to see the excitement. There were a lot of high school students who were there from the various teams, kind of egging each other on, but still cheering for everybody as baskets were made. Also at Mount Desert, Tom Spear, who's you've heard, is coming to the high school and done work with students here and has worked at MDES and working with staff on ways of, working on how do you deal with stress and using breathing techniques. He's going to bring that to students there. Also saw an interesting question from pre-Kers at MDES on their newsletter where they asked about where does wool come from? And you'll have to go to their newsletter to see what the pre-K student answered and then how the research they did to sort of figure out actually where wool actually comes from and some of the work that they did. And also at Mount Desert, the Bar Harbor Garden Club and some of our schools they have a poem contest that they do, and they've done that at a variety of schools, and they were there and they had a student who won the poem contest, and that will go on to the Main State Garden Club, and then they read all the poems from throughout the state. There have been students from Trenton and elsewhere who sort of won that prize, but it's really special that the Garden Club comes in and sort of talks about writing and poems and gives students a chance to sort of share their creativity in that way. At Pematic, like I said, and Tremont, the Trematic girls won the Coastal League championship. At Pematic, they every Friday do sort of a school spirit thing, and Crazy Sock Day is coming up. They had Crazy Hair Day last Friday, and one of the things that they highlighted is that their makerspace is in full swing, and Mike Brzezowski, who does the work there, where they're focusing on Lego robotics, 3D printing, and some of the 3D printing that they're doing there is trying to solve problems at the school. So if there's a need that a teacher may have or an office and it's something that can be created, they're utilizing that space to be able to do that in support of their school. And one of the middle school students qualified for the state math counts competition. On Swans, the GSA Steel Revolution Band is visiting the schools, so that's kind of neat, bringing music out to the island. The middle school science team, what they're doing out there is they're kind of looking into the ticks of Maine, and they're going to be doing some research on pulling not only, believe it or not, one of the ways to check for ticks is you pull a sheet along the grass and you can turn it over and you can sort of see what is there. And so they're going to do some research on the ticks that might be on their playground, but then they're going to go to different parts of the island and take a look at that. The K2 folks had a visit from the county sheriff, and they're always eager to learn what the kids are doing when they're visiting. At Tremont, the main college circle, if you recall, that's where the aspirations essay and 5th and 6th graders do all that throughout all of our schools, but they were at Tremont recently, and so folks will be writing their essay on, their aspirations around college or career. And then we have those speech contests later on in the spring when you can sit outside and listen to the wonderful aspirations that students have. That's always fun. They were also picked for NAEP testing, and so they will be doing that. And they have a drama club that's there, and Tremont's drama club is starting back up again, and so that'll be a good thing for expression for those students. In Trenton, I'm really proud of the fact that when I walk in there, and I saw today when I was there that students in art were working on their bricks, and that's something that the art teacher and I sort of came up with when I was principal there. And there's this whole wall of white bricks, and 8th graders, as part of that process of leaving, sort of give a gift to their class of some of their creativity along that brick wall, and they were there working hard today on that project. Trenton, too, was chosen for the NAEP tests, so in 4th grade. They, like others also, a couple of weeks ago, the pep bands from the elementary schools, or the bands from the elementary schools, came up and played with the high school pep bands, and that's always a wonderful experience for those kids to come up and play with the high school students. And then they've also had the main outdoor school come and is doing work with their kindergarten through 8th grade on some outdoor education activities. So it's sort of a busy time through all of our schools, and it's great to be able to sort of see whether I'm in a building or when I look through their newsletters to see what's going on. And it's, I think, really important for you all to sort of hear what's happening in all of our regional schools, because guess what? They all come here and have had all these wonderful experiences that they get to share and be part of their high school experience. And sort of the last thing is that the middle school jazz festivals are coming up, and that is actually happening here at the high school on the 13th, I believe, tomorrow. And so there'll be a lot of music here. Just some district-wide info. We got our state pre-K report, and it was glowing with the experiences that our kids are having. One of the things that they sort of share that will be important for us is to make sure that we're clear on our enrollment expectations by school, and PK is not compulsory, so there are some, it's really important for parents to know how their kids can get into pre-K, particularly if you get to a point where you're going above the number that's allowable for a classroom. And so they asked to clarify that and to make sure there's a clear pre-K transition. And so all of our teams are sort of working on those. In terms of teacher appreciation, last week was counselor appreciation, and so I give a shout out to all of our school counselors and the work that they do in supporting our students and our families, particularly when there are some hard times that have come upon some of our communities. And that has happened a little bit more than we would have wanted it in this district, but they have really come forward and have supported the staff and the students in all of our schools. So thank you, counselors. I also wanted to highlight, this is the time of year where people can give a nomination to the Hancock County Teacher of the Year, which can then eventually go on, if a teacher chooses, to the Maine Teacher of the Year and the National Teacher of the Year. And we had 3 schools represented with 4 teachers. In Trenton, Linda Dunn was nominated by a student at the high school. Linda Dunn teaches math intervention, and reading part of the little blurb of what this student felt that this teacher meant to them and their abilities to sort of pick them up and prepare them for high school math was pretty touching. And in Bar Harbor, we have Linda Miller in foreign language, and a colleague sort of talked about her teaching style and what she saw, and so she nominated her. And also in Bar Harbor, Meryl Sweeney, who's a fourth grade teacher, was also nominated by a colleague, just sort of talking about the impact she has on her colleagues in her fourth grade team, but also her impact of her teaching on her students. And she was nominated. And then finally in Tremont, Caroline Fournier in second grade was nominated by a colleague in her experience in the second grade and what she does to support her second graders in learning. So all those teachers have a decision to make. The Teacher of the Year is I don't want to say arduous process, but it's definitely a reflective process that takes you through your own teaching experience and what you're doing, but provides that reflection, and then you get to share that with colleagues. And it's a lot of work, and so some may choose and some may not, but I think just to be nominated and I get the ability to sort of read some of those snippets, and that's really a wonderful thing. So congratulations to those teachers who were identified, whether as a student or a colleague, in terms of what they're providing for their students. So congratulations to them. We had talked a little bit last time around HCTC, and this is maybe more of a high school thing, but the Brookside restaurant is something that HCTC provides on Wednesdays around 12 to 1. It's a lunchtime, so if you are in Ellsworth and you want to have lunch, and that would be a great place to go. We have some MDI students who are in that cooking program, as well as students from some of our other regional schools. And I'm going to try to put out something, and maybe something that if folks want to go, maybe lunch in Ellsworth to see HCTC. So in the next month, I'll probably put out a notice, and if there are board members that want to go out for a field trip, when I was in our HCTC advisory, it sort of came up, and they'd be very much interested if people wanted to come and have lunch, and maybe an island contingent would be really fun to go and have lunch and learn a little bit about the programs and see the building. So look for that from me. And then in terms of budgets, I wanted to share that we're sort of moving along in the process. The high school we just passed, so we have voter approval coming up. At Pematic, we'll be looking at a final draft. Connors Emerson has gone through the process and will be going through the town council and the various committees and awaiting voter approval. Swans, Nancy and I will be going out at the end of this month for their voter approval in Tremont. The board passed the budget, and so we have one more meeting before we pass the budget. We met with the select board and sort of talked about it, and then we have one more meeting with the board, and then it goes on to voter approval. Cranberry Island, they are at that next step in terms of going in front of their town. That's their next step. Frenchboro, we have a preliminary budget meeting tomorrow, and then following the same process as others. At Mount Desert, we're still looking at our revised budgets and have, before that gets passed. And Trenton, we're still in the revision process, and the AOS, we got voter approval just last month. And legislative updates, I just wanted to talk a little bit about you may have heard in the news about CDS Part B, which is the FAPE responsibility, free and appropriate education for students who have IEPs. The organization that took care of birth to grade 5 was the CDS. What's that?
Age 5.
Age 5. What did I say?
Grade 5.
Did I say grade 5? Talking too fast. Birth to grade 5, which would be our kindergarten. Age 5.
You just did it.
This is where the things that Tom is teaching, where you take a breath and sort of clear your head. Those are the things that you're supposed to do. And so the Department of Education is coming up with a model to take a look at that, where schools, like most states, sort of take on the obligation of sort of 3- and 4-year-olds, particularly for the state of Maine. It would be through the services around the case management. And so that information is out there. There's the legislature still has to sort of work through what that's going to look like. It doesn't mean every school has to create a pre-K program. However, schools would be responsible for making sure students are getting the services. And there could be a reorganization of CDS, possibly as a service center to support schools. And then there's the whole funding piece. And the two pieces that are important to know about funding is, if it gets through the legislature, then one, yes, those pre-Kers would count, even if you don't have a pre-K, those students would count towards your student count when it comes to the process of getting money. But also outside of that, the idea from the department is that you would get, outside of the funding formula, 100% funding for the service costs of case managing those students. And it could be a tuition, and the numbers that were put out there were between $8,000 and $10,000 a student. And so that would be paid for outside of the process, because as we know, as you're learning, as we go through our budgets, is that for special education, they're 2 years behind. And so as a way of managing that, at least for these youngest, is that they would put that on the front end. So we'll see, where that takes us, and I'll probably be sharing more as that legislation sort of moves through the legislature. They are asking that some schools, if they're ready to jump on now, I don't think we're in that realm, but it'll be interesting to watch that process, and I'll share as we move along. On reorganization, I just wanted to share that we have our full membership now. I was, before this meeting, working on my note to all the members and then creating a form to figure out when is going to be the best time for us to meet. I am looking at 2 meetings a month, and those meetings would be probably about an hour and a half as we work through the process of the RPC and identifying our path forward. And I'm in the process of interviewing someone who would help facilitate those pieces. So folks who have stood up and are going to be on the RPC, they'll get a note from me before the end of this week with a form, so I can figure out what days within a month period are going to be the best for those meetings. And then just a quick policy update, just to share that we are working through ACAA, and I've talked about that. That's our harassment policy, and making sure that it's meeting the goals and being as responsive as the board had set that out to be when we looked at that about 1.5 years ago. We have some experience with it, and so it's sort of good to sort of come around and make sure it's meeting those goals. We'll be working on absenteeism, because we have a policy that's kind of out of date, particularly around the high school, because it talks about lack of credit and things like that, and there is a new chronic absenteeism law, and we want to sort of make sure that our policies are aligned. The folks on the tech team will be coming to us for computer network use, and then information on recruiting and hiring, and just some tweaks to that. Other than that, that's my report.
Enough questions for Mike? Lily?
This might be an overreaction, but does the state realize when they keep asking schools to take care of more and more and more stuff, because like the tough position it puts us in as, every town, every district to, if we can't find enough people to do the things for what we already need, how are we going to find the people to take care of are they going to help us with that? Is the funding model in such a way that it's when we go to our select boards and our town councils and we get so much pushback, typically that everybody gets supported, but there's a lot of discussion about what can you cut, what can you do, how can you make this better? And now we're going to be asked to, I'm not saying that I don't want to support young children and families and all that, but the state is and I know maybe I'm late to the game, I should have been paying attention, but where can we show up to kind of use our voices to get some help with this?
Well, your voice has been shared, because superintendents are listening to not only the folks who are sharing that same information and sharing it at the various meetings with the state. This is, most states do provide the FAPE for those youngest. It's sort of, Maine is sort of odd in the way that it does this, and they are trying to listen and paying attention, and hopefully utilizing CDS in a way that they would act as a service center to help meet some of those needs, because they do have employees that work for them. To be honest, that's different in different part of the state, so they're gonna have to get a handle on that distribution of whether it's speech and language pathologists or 282 certified, that would be SPED teachers, or case managers, and what that looks like, because there is disparity between the regions. But those questions are asked at whether it's a superintendent's meeting with state officials there, or at the legislature, from organizations from the MPA to the Superintendent's Association. They're in those meetings, but you have a common question that's shared.
I just think it's not possible to ask the people in the positions that they're in now in our district to add a whole nother segment of
I think the thing,
responsibility to that.
I mean, Mike can correct me if I'm wrong, but having it done through the school is a far better model in terms of like bringing kids into kindergarten readiness. It's about obtaining the funding. It's about the state agreeing to fund and provide other supports so that it's successful. Is that?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you were to look at what model works best, that brings those kids with needs into our school system, you want to know early on, and you want to be able to understand them and help be a part of building their plans. So there are parts of it that are sort of really good in terms of the educational idea behind it. It's a good idea. It's trying to figure out how to do that in a way that is thoughtful and provides the funding. And this idea of front loading 100% is a big deal.
Thank you.
And hopefully that makes it through the process. Otherwise, it becomes very difficult, as we're learning in a lot of our budgets.
Any other questions for Mike? Okay, Directors of Teaching and Learning, Lily and Rhonda.
What was fortuitous, I guess, that the high school, that Jill did some work with you folks on MTSS, because the February note is about MTSS and how social emotional learning and behavior are dovetailed in. At the beginning of the year, we had Danielle Pierre, our Great Schools Partnership coach, do a presentation to the staff about MTSS and SEL and responsive classroom. And so this note is intended to be kind of a reminder of what Danielle had talked about, and then to get our March 15th day teed up, because we have 6 people coming from responsive classroom to work with our K-8, pre-K-8 schools. And then the high school is going to be working on restorative practices. Any questions about responsive classroom, MTSS?
Are there any questions?
And then I just want to add in support of MTSS and Tier 1, our K-4 teachers today just started looking at a standards review, and they looked at the K-4 reading standards and are reviewing those, and then tomorrow we're going to be working on math. So a small group is doing that work, and then it will go out to all the other teachers for feedback, and then to the principals. And so we want to get everybody's input on that.
Questions? Okay, moving on to discussion items. First reading of revisions to policy, GCF, professional staff hiring.
So our policy, if you look, there's a lot of yellow in there. So our policy was kind of broad and not very specific, and this is from the MSMA, the Maine School Management, and the additions are there just to support a little bit more clarity in terms of the selection process, particularly in the guidelines on the bottom, that sort of just helps clarify the roles of hiring. There were some changes in law in terms of how you, especially around non-discrimination. I think that wasn't the last year, but the year before, in terms of hiring, there's a checklist on the application where you would say whether or not you were arrested, and you're supposed to, has to be pulled out because you want to make sure that people have an opportunity based on the merits to at least get into that you're not discriminating at that level. Once you get through the interview, then you're able to hand that section out and people have to fill it out. And if there was an issue, then they have to sort of write what had occurred and any changes that they made to sort of support themselves moving forward. And so I think this change in the policy just sort of helps sort of clarify some of the expectations. And so I see it sort of as a helpful clarification of that process.
Any questions about this? And again, we'll bring this back for the next meeting for voting. If you think of a comment or whatever, you can send it to Mike or I to review before the next policy committee meeting. Okay. This brings us to the school calendar draft, and Mike has.
And you all have, the draft was sent out and attached to the agenda. And so I just want to sort of go back. I went back and I did meet with meet and consult requirements that I have to do with the teachers, and then had a meeting with the principals to take a look at the calendar and make some tweaks from the last one that you saw. And so I want to sort of start with, again, like I did last time, in talking about sort of regional requirements. We are in a school region, and we do send students to HCTC. And so schools in Hancock County and in our CTE region, the Career and Technical Education, must ensure that their calendars are not out of sync more than sort of 6 days. And the goal of that is to ensure that your CTE students are maximizing their educational experience. Like I said, we have about 50 students, and that number is growing, which is a good thing in terms of our connection with HCTC and the students' experience. So that's sort of part of that picture. And right now, other than Lemoyne and Hancock, which do not have high schools, they just have elementary schools. All other schools are starting before Labor Day, and so ensuring that our calendar is sort of within that realm sort of keeps us within those 6 days. In terms of maintaining early release, like I talked about last time, we have those 5 district days. There's sort of, no changes in that, and those are utilized for curriculum and district initiatives to support MTSS. And grade level collaboration in the curriculum. One of the things I did with this calendar, making some tweaks, we took one of the early releases out of September and just have the one district-based for that beginning of the school year. And then we sort of redistributed them. And I'll talk a little bit about the 4 school-based ones that we have. And those days are organized, and this was in conversations with the principal, as close to a 6-week cycle as possible to support MTSS data rotation to review student learning goals and interventions. So, right now this calendar has those, the ER and the DB, which when this gets passed, we'll take those out. Parents just need to know that it's early release. You don't need to know which one it is, just to make it a little bit easier to understand. And so right now I got as close as possible in terms of those 6-week cycles. And of course, sort of hard to meet everyone. And those Fridays we tried to leave out of weeks that were running into a holiday. However, for the month of April, that school-based early release, to maximize that MTSS rotation, it does land on before the holiday. And so, again, with the well planned out goals, particularly around looking at students, all of those days could be very productive. One of the requests from the teachers was we had moved that August day, the August 19th, in this year's calendar, it would have been August 20th, was school didn't start yet, and we put that on a Friday, thinking that folks might want a day off in terms of bringing kids to school, but the teachers felt that was part of that before Labor Day and after Labor Day discussion, just to try to sort of maximize some of that time in the summer. So I did put that, day back. So Monday the 19th, there's no school. We have our 2 early learning days for our new teachers, and then we have our professional development days, just like this past year, on that Thursday and Friday, and the teacher day on the Monday, and then we sort of start school. Some of the other district schools, they'll start on the Wednesday instead of on the Tuesday. We're starting on the Tuesday. And part of that, the work with the calendar, which is really difficult, is, we're often planning a year in advance in terms of trying to bring important speakers to our schools to be able to support our staff. And so, trying to make these decisions as early as possible in terms of setting those days is sort of really important as part of that process. And then other things of interest in the calendar, I think one thing it's really important to recognize is that the idea of, the ever-expanding season that occurs here within our region. And yes, we are a vacation hub for folks. And all of you, and I would know from, moving here in 1995, and noticing that from that time, that season has grown longer and longer and longer, and is pushing into October and into November, with leaf peeping and all of that. And so I think that's really important to understand how that's impacting our support staff with conflicting between jobs that they might have in the summer and, their desire and interest in having their education career. And so one of the things that I'm going to be doing as we move through the rest of this week is speaking with the administrative team to do some data collection on how many staff is this impacting in terms of folks who are really struggling with that season position that they have and their educational career that they have. And then to try to think about what supports can be put in place to support their school career, which is really important. But I don't know if we're able to be able to solve that problem by just moving a few days here and there, because the season is growing into October and people are in need in some of the shops and whether they have some of their own businesses. So I think we have to sort of be creative. But I think the first thing I need to know is I need the data on how many people this is actually impacting. So that's something that I'll be looking at. The second piece in terms of the work that we did in January and then thinking about the calendar for this year is a recognition that early release is really important to our educators and to our principals. But the way to make that work is maximizing our partnerships. So one of the things that's later on in this agenda is I'm going to be asking for folks to email me from the board who would be interested in a task force on, not a task force, but a committee to sort of take a look at that starting this year. We do have schools that are going to be applying for next year on some after-school funds where we might be able to pilot some connections. But I think it's important to recognize, to make it worthwhile for students and to make it worthwhile for our partners, there would have to be that regular experience to make it meaningful and exciting. And so that might take some time, but we might have some pilots that we could do as we move into next year. And so I'll be asking for folks, and then I'll be talking to the administrative team and some of our community partners of who might be interested in taking a look at this, and then hopefully by the end of the year, maybe have some recommendations that we can do. And then the other thing I want to identify is Labor Day moves. And so in terms of that starting a little bit earlier, we're going to see Labor Day sort of moving throughout the week and it not feeling so brushed up against brushed up against August. And that's just sort of the nature of the calendar. And so as Labor Day moves, it's going to get, further down the week rather than being on the Monday. It'll be over on, that day of the week it changes and it moves. Yeah, that first. It's not always going to be on a Monday, and so that changes that start date a little bit. As I have my meetings regionally, we'll sort of talk about the, before Labor Day or after Labor Day and have those conversations, and we'll have those early on and taking a look at them. So, but after the tweaks that I made, trying to hear many voices and trying to find the best calendar to meet the needs of staff and students. The calendar that I have in front of you is the one that I suggest to be able to move forward. And then making sure that thinking about those other calendar interests are at the forefront and moving forward and thinking about, for next year.
Are there questions? Carrie?
So we had one of our teachers come to the Tremont meeting and talk about the calendar, and I'd never really thought about it the way that I heard it from her that night. And I know you've heard this, Mike, but I don't know that everybody else.
I think it was the public comment.
It was, but I don't know that everybody read the public comment. I mean, it's hard when you get to a meeting and it hasn't been released ahead of time. But the idea that we've got kids coming in August, and a lot of these seasonal jobs, I mean, I think employers, for the most part, are looking for people who will stay through Labor Day. They don't want people who are leaving 2 weeks before Labor Day. So so I think that's an issue for the people who are being employed, but also for our kids, and that's who we're here to advocate for, is our kids. Every day that those kids are in a classroom and don't have the supports that they need is a day that is going to be hard for the kid, it's going to be hard for the teachers, it's going to be hard for the administration. And we're talking about when they're ramping up. We're not talking about at the end of the year when, yes, the season is starting earlier as well as going longer. But at the end of the year, these kids, we have to hope, are in their routines and they know what their day is going to look like, and they're used to those supports. And so if they lose some of that support, maybe it's not so detrimental as taking a month to get the support that they need. And I understand the whole thing about HCTC and how that handcuffs us. But I feel like we need to listen to this and really take this to heart, that these kids, that is such a critical time for them when they're first getting to school, when they're first ramping up, when they're in a new situation for the year. That's the time when they need these supports the most. Yeah. And every day I feel like is critical. That it may feel like saving them 3 days or saving them 5 days of that isn't that big of a deal, but I don't agree with that. I think every day that we can give them the support that they need is a better day for those kids.
I think part of my an answer to that is I want to collect the data to see how widespread that is. And I know that, I heard that response both at the Tremont meeting and I read it, and that was part of my interest in really wanted to take a look at how much impacted is that. I also know that the beginning of those couple of those days before Labor Day and after, one of the things that we're really building in schools in those early days is those routines in the classroom, and that the teacher has all of their kids there to be able to sort of build community and build those aspects of understanding how the classroom works and sort of doing that. So that sort of helps us in that we're not pulling kids out at that point for direct instruction. It's more making sure they understand the culture of their classroom and the routines that is going to be expected of them in those first couple of days, and sort of trying to deal with that tension of supporting the kids and making sure that they're getting what they need in the classrooms at that time. Is really important, and I think that we'll work really hard, and I understand that the staff will work really hard at making sure that they have all the support during those early few weeks as they're working on classroom routines and classroom culture and building that up. And then figuring out, all right, how are we going to support them once that work is done and the pullouts start to happen, making sure we have the staff to be able to do that. But to understand it truly, I think I need a little bit more data to help sort of support what that looks like, and that's what I'll be asking my principals to sort of help me with.
And I understand what you're saying with that, Mike, but I think also, if I understand correctly how some of this support works with these kids that really need like the one-on-ones and that, it's not just about being pulled out of the classroom, it's about the teacher in the classroom having the support of having those extra adults in the room who are working one-on-one with these kids so that they don't disrupt the rest of the classroom, which again is hurting the kids in there who are there to learn, but also making it really hard for the teachers to do their jobs. And I mean, I've never seen teachers come out of the woodwork like they did this past fall in Tremont saying, this is untenable. Like, we're gonna lose teachers if we don't have the support in there.
Yes, so, do you have a response now?
And yeah, that was definitely a big thing, but I don't think that wasn't driven by the calendar. That was driven by a nationwide, if not statewide, lack of folks interested in working, coming into work. What role the calendar plays, I would like to learn a little bit more about that, and that's why I want to move forward. But that experience wasn't a calendar experience. That was we're having a hard time filling positions everywhere, whether that's schools or at the grocery store.
My feeling, is that there's no perfect calendar. In the time that I've been on the school board, this is one of the most controversial topics that we do. The placement of vacations, whether to start before or after Labor Day, and how late you go into June, are always extraordinarily difficult things. My thinking is that, and my knowledge is that Mike has consulted extensively with the association, with parents, with the board. So I feel like what we're seeing is a calendar that sort of tried to balance those interests, with foremost being what's in the best interests of children. I mean, that's our ultimate mandate. So I think we're probably not going to find a calendar that checks everyone's box. So I support this particular calendar, but for those reasons.
I just wanted to say, I agree. We asked you to make these tweaks that we talked about last time that we thought would improve the template that has been working without major changes. We attempted a major change, or threw out an idea for a major change last year, and responded to that, but it seems like there are some bigger items worthy of a subcommittee. We had a calendar subcommittee that I was on, I don't know, like 10 years ago maybe. And we did really good work in that, and we talked about, bigger picture items, changing vacations and all of the things. I mean, there were some radical ideas that changed the course of the year altogether. And I think it seems like it's time again, and it's my opinion, not to futz with this one anymore and to move this forward, but to really dig deeper next year, because it sounds like the community might be more on board with some of the bigger shifts.
So meaning formation of a calendar
Yeah.
subcommittee.
Yeah, I'm not necessarily volunteering for it, but
We can add that to the next agenda. Jessica, and then
Yeah, so I totally hear, I think year after year we hear we need to start planning the calendar sooner. So that tells me that a subcommittee is probably necessary, because every year we hear, hey, we need to start this sooner. I guess my comment was just for Mike too. Could you start, when you're looking into the data of how many people are affected by an earlier start, could you also look at the temperature differences that we've experienced throughout the years? Because I feel like the first week that the kids go back to school is the only week we actually get of summer weather. And some of these kids come home and they're beat in the face and like, well, I didn't know where the water was, and I didn't know who I should ask to get some water. And I don't know how many of our schools actually have air conditioning in in the building. So I think it'd be interesting to know the statistics of just how much global warming is affecting the kids when they are starting in that August timeframe.
My question was just related to the aligning our calendar with the HCTC calendar, whatever, and like what the, like, we seem kind of stuck on that, and I don't know much about the process. Like, when do we need to, how do we influence that process, or how do the concerns that we bring to our calendar factor into that broader regional calendar planning?
It's a state part of having a CTE region, then within those regions, schools have to comply by that state, I guess you can call it sort of a mandate. And those conversations could start earlier, and I already planted the seed with my colleagues, and there's going to be, a change in personnel at that level, and so those might be different conversations than, who's sitting at the table right now and thinking about whether you go before Labor Day or after Labor Day. There was some nodding when I brought it up this time. But I sort of see it as, and maybe it's because I'm a parent of a HCTC student who is now sort of thriving and understand just as, set balance. Carrie, you're very passionate and thoughtful about those kids at the Tremont School and what their needs are, and that's the same for all of the kids. But also there's 50 kids who, if you get way out of sync, they're losing their learning opportunity for a very powerful experience that can set them up for life. And so, yeah, I'm pretty passionate on that side too. And how you balance those, that's hard. And you have this 6-day window you can kind of play with. But I would hate to see them, where you're being told by the state, well, you're going to have to make some changes after you've already done a bunch of work. I'd like to try to get that on the front side, but they're an important constituency to look at, and we're having more students want to, look at that direction. It's important to work hard to try to balance as much as possible all of those needs, and that's impossible.
Mike does meet with those superintendents, so they could decide en masse that they all wanted, that we're all going to move to after Labor Day or something. That is a choice that could be made, right?
And I could bring temperature data. A lot of those schools are not air conditioned.
Could I add
that are
something to
taking
that?
part.
I was on the subcommittee work way back when, and I know we tried really tried to do some radical ideas, 2 vacations instead of 3, for instance, do a March vacation. What people don't, the other components that we're competing with is, Maine Principals Association, that's basketball week, February vacation, right? And so we'd be setting our kids up in that way. Well, you don't want to make your schedule around basketball. Well, we put a wonderful vacation in March, and that was all State Jazz Band Festival, right? So there was always some competing interests that we had to line up with everybody else in the state. It's really hard to move away from that. Yeah.
Jamie?
Just a quick one, with the fall sports, I don't know when they can start practice, if that's benchmarked to when school starts, or if there's like a start date in August. So I feel like cross country already starts in early August. Does that get pushed up a week because the calendar gets pushed up a week, or is that based on?
I think, when did it start this year? Because the start date is the same as it was this year. I think it's that first week of August.
So that wouldn't change with the school getting moved up?
Yeah,
I think that's just like her standard.
I don't mean just for cross country, I meant for any fall sports.
Any fall sport.
Yeah.
I think that August date stayed the same regardless. I don't think they ever sort of
It's
pushed up.
MPA
That's
Yeah.
Same.
Marie?
I want to thank you for this calendar. I think it's, and I always have comments on the calendar, as you know. I look at this as probably the most thoughtful calendar that's taken into the most voices, which I'm not even sure sometimes that's good, because we have to focus on what's best for the students, but we also know that what's best for the students is best for parents and best for administration. But I think this is the most, the revisions you've made have been so thoughtful. You haven't necessarily just changed something because one person said one thing. So I want to thank you for a really thoughtful calendar that you heard a lot of the things, my big thing is consistency throughout the week and, not having as many partial weeks, and that's nearly impossible with all the things we're trying to fit in. But you really did a fantastic job doing that, so thank you. Because my first question was going to be about why are you putting that day in August 19th and taking it off? So that's already gone, and I appreciate your explanation for it. From a bigger picture point of view, these are the things that come to mind in future planning. Because we're never gonna all be agree on holiday breaks, Thanksgiving, we're never gonna agree on that before Labor Day, after Day. What I look at is how climate change is affecting how it really is affecting the kids in school and the consistency of kids in school. I think it was like 10 years ago or 15 years ago, we had like only 4 snow days or whatever. Now we don't call them snow days because now they're weather days. And after that, we were in school and it was still July. And so we plugged in 10 weather days. We did that for like 2 or 3 years. And then we like made up a story that we don't need to do that anymore. Although now we still have all these weather days. So we've missed like we almost missed a week of school because of severe weather. So what is climate change? How is it impacting? When is it impacting? So I'd say more than just the temperature, the first week we get back. We know that in October, November, and December, we're increasing the number of storm days. Either because we're losing electricity, or there's wind, or there's something that's happening. And now that we have this unified calendar, if one school has power but the other doesn't, we're all shutting down. So we need to think about, like, I know we want a unified calendar, but you know, that is a big factor. If we plotted out probably if you have the data in all your spare time, if you were to look at like when the most times we've had these storm days, it's November and December probably, and a few extra, like when it snowed on Halloween like 4 years ago or whatever. So like, and then 2, what are we gonna do about that? Everyone in my nuclear family is annoyed with me because I told them that they should have gone to school for those last 5 days at the end of the year in June, because they missed 5 days of school and we got a reprieve. I can't remember, what's it called?
Waiver.
A waiver from the state, and I was the only one that was complaining about that. Kids were like, shut up. But I was like, you're supposed to be in school for 100 and whatever days. I don't even know anymore. We haven't been in school for the 100 and whatever days since pre-COVID, and probably maybe not even before pre-COVID. So if we're supposed to be in school for 175 days, and we weren't for 2.5 years, and then last year we got a waiver, like when are we ever going to be in school for 175 days again? I think that deserves some thought, even if it has to be in June, which is connected to, if we start really considering, just throwing it out there, starting after Labor Day, and we're not planning for the fact that we're going to have 5 to 6 days, snow days, weather days, before June, we're going to be in school through the end of July. You can't just make it after Labor Day, I'm getting on a soapbox, without considering 10 snow days or 10 weather days. And then I guess the third thing is like calendar planning for climate change, but facility planning for climate change. I think someone brought up, we were talking about the generator, maybe it was me. No, we were talking about the generator, Matt, and you were talking about the differences in what the generator can do, what it's built for, what it can't do. And we talked about, we don't have a place on this island that can serve as a storm surge place, like a safe, warm place, shelter. And so maybe there's some funding for, so not only would that keep our kids, at least some of our high school kids in school those days, but it may also function another way for families that are in need, because we're not going to stop seeing this like rampant like storms. We're just not. I mean, we're just not. So those, I stopped kind of worrying for the most part about this individual calendar and the day off, blah, blah, blah. The bigger picture is the stuff that I think we need to figure out how to plan for. The impacts of climate change on this facility, and how we can make these facilities more conducive to keeping kids in them to learn throughout the week during storms, and also a calendar that is able to more easily absorb storm days without us getting a reprieve in June or going to school, whatever it is, like building in some more storm days in that, because that's what's going to impact us, I think, greater than 1 day here, 1 day there, half day here, half day there.
So they seem like great discussion topics for the calendar subcommittee.
Which I will not be on. God bless you for saying that you want to do that. That took forever, and nobody, like, it was too bold, I would say. And it created, it would really, I would say, it shined a light on all the reasons why it may be better to continue to tweak what we have than do something really bold, which I can't believe I'm saying that, but anyway, that's my thought process on that.
Carrie?
First, I just want to mention, I totally agree about about having this be a warming center or shelter, and that is being discussed at the trustees level, so.
In the budget, put in the budget.
Because we should be using these wonderful solar panels that the trustees secured to have battery backup for this school, so. And I just want to ask, can we get the HCTC start and end dates on this calendar? Or just, can you tell us what they are? Just so that we understand that.
And are you saying we've got a 6-day window to get in here, or we can't do HDCT?
Not that you can't, but
Or
they
miss a
suggest,
day, or-
they'll miss more, those kids will miss more school days if you can't.
More school days or more HTs?
Less, they'd be going to class less often if you get out of whack. You have to stay, you can stay within those 6 days. And the high school works really hard. I think right now this calendar is kind of out. I think it's 6 days, but we send kids to school on the days that we have professional days and they don't. So we send a bus to try to make up for that. And so we do those experiences to make sure that they're getting to school. We did that this year. So the first day of school would be August 27th. And the last day of school is the 10th of June.
That's for HCTC or that's for us?
HCTC.
So they are starting that early.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And we're starting the 27th and we're out the 6th. Unless we have storm days.
Well, we have storm days, so, I mean, that's what I'm saying.
No,
like-
this is the 24-25 calendar.
Okay.
Not this year. I'm still working on that. I have my little
I'm
tally
not
sheet
voting
right
for a waiver,
there.
I'm just saying, like, when we get to the point where we have to choose, like, well, it sucks for the kids to be in school that late, so let's get a waiver, who are we shorting? We're shorting the kids out of 5 days of school.
All of the kids.
All of the kids.
Anyone else? Amisha?
I just, in addition to the kind of inquiry about what's the data about staff, how it affects them with Labor Day or ability to hire, I wonder about students and their families and like housing shortages at the beginning and the end of the season. And I don't know enough about it, but I would assume that there's a lot of families that don't have year-round housing that are part of our school communities, and expecting them to be housed in here before Labor Day. I don't know if that's a bigger problem or at the beginning or the end of the year, or it's just a problem all the time, but I think it's a factor to consider.
Anyone else?
So would you like us to vote on this though? I mean,
Yes. At the board's pleasure. I know it's not an action item, but, Jessica and I have talked and, whether it's, that's something to do, then we could do it tonight and.
yeah, I'll make a motion to approve the 2024-2025 calendar as presented.
Second?
Any discussion? All in favor? All opposed? Okay, so we have a calendar.
Thank you all for the thoughtful feedback. That's much appreciated. It'll make for rich conversation.
So our other business is formation of a subcommittee for after-school early release day programming. Are there volunteers for that committee?
I will volunteer, because I think I've made that.
Can I ask a question?
When would that start?
What's that?
When would that kick off?
Probably,
April?
I was thinking, probably sometime in April.
Jessica's gonna be on it, right?
I have future after-schoolers, so.
Yeah, I'm almost out of here.
I did say I would dial for dollars.
I think you said something at the last meeting.
Yeah, I said I'll dial for dollars, that's what we call it.
If there's more, are there more volunteers now, or if there's not, if you think of you want to volunteer after this, you can email Mike. Is that good?
Just asking how many people you want, and do we need one from each school, or is that like?
You don't have to have one. I mean, I think probably 4 to 5 people is optimal for.
Yeah, we'll want an administrator.
Yeah, a K-8 administrator, because it doesn't really affect high school. Okay, so Mike will work on his other non-board members, right?
Yes.
Yes, and then, but if you have feedback to that, please send to Mike, and we'll deal with the calendar subcommittee at the next meeting. That's on future agenda items. Other future agenda items besides our regular reports and updates, we'll have more on policy in the ACAA for sure.
I'll
Okay.
double check our matrix.
Yes, well, our matrix.
Oh.
Is there any additional public comment? Okay, next meeting is the 11th of March, 2024, probably 6
Marie.
o'clock. Marie.
Sorry, I have a question. Did anyone, who's note taking?
Selena?
Oh, I didn't see you. I was like, sorry. Okay, sorry. All of a sudden I panicked. 2, can we put a table? Can we get another table? Can we put that in the, is there another table?
Oh, yes.
We're always short one table.
Yes, we'll get
And
another
I'm
table.
like, I need a table. And I'm sure you need a table. So
Yeah.
I don't know. Can we just get one
Get
more
another table.
for always,
Well,
like a standing
also-
table order? Nobody wants to sit next to you.
Oh, there's a seat.
Okay, so the next meeting will probably be at 6, but it depends on the high school meeting, so keep track of your emails. Oh, is there a motion to adjourn?
Someone, second.